Okay, so I think you'll probably, I don't know, get a kick out of some of this on shame because shame is part of my primary repression. But what I've been saying to people is fear and shame is a part of everybody's primary. With any kind of, if you had unconscious parents, if you had parents in which you just couldn't be yourself in some way, you probably have fear and shame as part of your primary. And so I think many people can appreciate this video because yeah, this has been like an Achilles heel for me. I mean, anger was really the Achilles heel, repression of anger. But shame. Okay, so I have some interesting things to share with you here. Before I go further, I want to show you what shame really is and where it's carried in the body. So I want you just to come down and bring your awareness fully into the body. Just rest it there in the places, including down deep in the stomach, pelvic area. Just feel all the way into the body and rest your awareness there. And then bring up your VIPs, mom, dad, especially anybody who shamed you or made you feel bad about who you are. And all you have to do here is just say this: I'm not ashamed of anything. Say that, check your body. Look back at your VIPs. I'm not ashamed of anything. Check your body. Switch it around a little bit. Say this: I'm not afraid to be seen fully by them. Check your body. I want to be seen by them. Check your body. I'm not afraid for them to see all the parts of me. I'm not afraid of that. Check your body. There's nothing wrong with me. If I were to show them myself, there's nothing wrong with me. Check your body. And then, I don't have to hide at all. Say that several times. If you don't feel the contraction, you will on the hide, maybe. I don't have to hide. Okay, so this energy is shame. But here's the thing. Okay, so that's gone from my body. That you're feeling right there, I had that for years in different areas of my body. The last place I had it was in the chronic pain. But when I had body contraction in other chakra areas, I would feel that like in the stomach. I don't have that there. I don't have it anywhere now. So you can see why I'm doing this video series. See, because this would be, shame would have kept me from doing this. And I wanted you to understand the work that I have done. Not to get your approval, because shame hides so much. I want you to understand the work here on shame is very somatic and very helpful. I can't even begin. I mean, imagine you don't have that energy anymore. Just imagine that. So here's the other thing I want to share with you. See, some of the teachers who repress anger have given themselves away inadvertently. Like there's some couple popular teachers who are open to share somewhat in the embodiment process who've said this, that shame is one of the last layers of the embodiment process. These teachers never have talked about anger or rage. And I happen to think they're anger repressors, okay? But they gave themselves away. Because I already knew that they were repressing anger because they're like me. But when they said that shame is there, which I already knew because they're human, what that tells me is they have the buried anger with that shame. And so the two join together. When you have anger repression and shame, see, what I didn't know until 3D KI is that shame is made up of other things. So my shame was made up of the anger that I felt but had to bury from being bullied for being who I am. If you explain it that way to people, they're like, well, of course you have buried anger if you say it that way. Yeah, they bullied me for traits that were natural for me. See that? My femininity didn't feel shameful until they started to do something about it, or the other traits for me. So although I didn't feel safe to feel that rage got stored in my body. I was angry that they did that to me, but I couldn't express it. So these teachers that you see as anger repressors, if you have a hint, when they're talking about shame, they're inadvertently admitting that they have buried rage because they don't yet know that the shame has anger in it. I didn't either. It took 3D KI to see it. So these teachers are like, it's a false humility is what I'm saying. See, a teacher who represses anger will be okay a little bit with sharing shame because it's vulnerable. It's not aggressive. See, but what they don't realize is that the anger and the rage is in the shame. And so they're admitting their repressed anger and rage when they talk about shame. It's neither here nor there, but that's what I'm saying, that shame drives them to do that. The irony is so thick. The shame drives them to not admit the anger or the rage that's buried and to admit the more vulnerable emotion of shame. It's just weird how it works. I didn't know that I was doing that either. I was so, like earlier in my teaching, I was talking about shame, my own shame. But I was doing that before talking about the anger. See? So I was doing what they do because I wasn't willing to face the anger. But once I faced the anger and I found that the anger was in the shame, the layers of shame left. So when these teachers are talking about the layers of shame still hanging around, that tells me that they have buried anger, among other things that they're just not getting to. If you're a hurt repressor, there's buried hurt or sadness with the shame. Because you're sad about the whole thing. You can't be yourself. You can't open to the sadness. There's, for whatever reason, whoever shut you down in life where you couldn't be yourself, there's shame with that. It's just with us all. So, shame on you, Scott. Well, I've already talked about the humiliation, and that came from bullying. But shame is a much bigger topic than humiliation. The humiliation was literally the bullying, like ridiculing, hitting me, chasing me, ostracizing me, getting everybody against me, just making life hell, calling me lots of names and gay slurs, bashing. That's humiliating. But shame is so much broader because, I was having sex with half of these guys that were bullying me. So all of that was very secretive. Everybody felt shame around that, and I couldn't share that with anybody. So my sexuality was shameful. And in my house, like, you're not really supposed to, my family, you're not really supposed to indulge in pleasures. Because, well, my dad is a adult child of an alcoholic. My grandfather was in the bars every day. My dad was dragging him out at my grandmother's request. So he grew up anti anyone who will engage in pleasure because it feels like a trauma to him. See? It's like he lost his dad almost. So in my household, being gay, that was a pleasure of mine, but no way. It wasn't necessarily that it was gay. That wasn't accepted, that I was gay. It was that you don't do that. Even in high school, it was like my dad had a porn collection, but it's like in the family, it didn't feel like I could share anything, especially about my homosexuality. So just very shaming around the whole thing. And then my gender, being both boy and girl, it just didn't feel like it was safe. So there's shame with that. And then any other pleasures, like, the first time my dad found out I smoked weed, it was the end of the fucking world. It's like I just killed somebody. And then any other drug. So that just made me want to do them more. That backfired. That's what adult children of alcoholics often do, is they become codependent with their kids. And then it backfires and their kids get into addiction and feel really ashamed because then they can't share it with the dad or the mom. So there's shame. It's everywhere. In my life, I can't speak for you, but I feel like a lot of people feel this way in one way or another. So this is, to me, something that should be dealt with from the beginning because it infuses the teaching. We're hiding, including anger. There's shame in hiding the anger, see? So it's actually affecting directly the teaching. There's shame in hiding. There's shame in sharing certain thoughts as a teacher. Like, I masturbate. For some teachers, they would never say that. That's how deep shame is. Even though all of them do. So being a teacher, there was shame in my body. All that energy that you felt, I had some semblance of that, up until 3DKI. And of course, I've already talked about a lot of this, so I don't want to repeat. But all the sex stuff I was doing on the side, I mean, I had an open relationship, so it wasn't cheating. But all the sex that I was having was still very much a private life, including the BDSM. So, of course, the shame was involved in that, driving that. And it was also driving the secrecy to where I couldn't say it publicly. So I'm just trying to give you an example of how we talk about, as non-dual teachers, talk about being really free beyond all opposites or whatever. And it just isn't true. Because if we were really free, we would just get up here. There wouldn't be shame. If we were that free, we would just be able to say, yeah, I like that kind of sex. I like when guys just smack my ass really hard and choke me. I prefer it. That's how I like it. I mean, that's not my preferred way of sex now, but it was. And that probably came from bullying, don't you think? The BDSM. Shame is an aphrodisiac. Remember. So this is why it's one of the final layers, because, like, I don't know about you, but I didn't want to give up my toys, my sexual things. So I think that some of us who are going to deal with the sexual shame here are you going to see is like you reach new plateaus where it's like when you deal with levels of shame or layers, some of your toys go away, your fetishes and your porn images that you love, because you've transmuted that energy. And there's an incredible amount of freedom in that. You want to do that. Your mind will tell you no, because I enjoy this. Shame is an aphrodisiac. A lot of men who search on women, you may not know this, and maybe women do too who watch porn, but I know men do because I've worked with them and I am one, is we'll search images. I'm not a porn guy, but I know how that works. You're searching for the image that really excites you. But if you look, many of you are looking for the more taboo image, like the stuff that goes over the edge, and it's like you don't want anybody to see that. And you'll notice that's what really turns you on, because shame is an aphrodisiac. So we're not going to be jumping up in joy and willingness to be transmuting shame here. But like anything else, if we don't deal with it, the studies tell us. Now there are some new studies that have gone beyond emotional repression. They're saying shame, to the extent that that's something else, because it's arguable whether that's even different than repression. But the studies are there now saying it's linked to, they're linking it to chronic pain and disease, which I knew already. And of course it's connected to mental health and addiction. This is a really important topic, but we're also ashamed to talk about it. This is our health. It's so important to talk about it. So I'm gonna go into this with kid gloves with you if we work together, because I understand the sensitivity of this one. But don't let your shame of shame stop you from looking at shame, because as you can tell, the rewards are so great. Just the not having that energy in my body that you just felt is enough in and of itself to do it. But the inside and outside are one. So I'm experiencing a super amount of freedom in my relationships in my life with this energy having been transmuted. But I don't want to sit here and do this video series about how awake and embodied I am. That's not what it is. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to tell you about how shame infiltrated my life, my relationships, my teaching, and then what I did about that. So it is hard to talk about emotional or shame apart from emotional repression, because it has these repressed emotions in it, like buried anger, rage, and the fear of being seen is a major part of shame. So what I was doing through the years with the BDSM, so you know, what I would do is I hadn't shared it with you all. So I would go into inquiry, imagine sharing it, and then here came the shame and I'd process it. But that was before 3DKI. So here again, I was not willing to go to the rage and the shame back then. See how I was bypassing? And this is why a lot of teachers are still dealing with the layers of shame. They just don't know it, because they're not dealing with the buried hurt or anger in the shame. And they don't know how. If they knew how, they would show you. Nobody who had a pathway to transmute shame would hide that from you unless they still had shame and the pathway wasn't working. And so they just felt too ashamed to share it with you. Don't be fooled by this shame thing. It's really running things along with repression. Again, I just want to remind you, if someone is really free, they're not identified with the opposites. So they could good and evil even. Like if they're really free, anger versus peace, good versus bad, right versus wrong, they're going to be showing up differently if somebody has dealt with these subjects. So just look for the people who show up in a way that doesn't look at all shameful. They're identified with a dualistic mind and body. They're trying to be good. It's what I was doing, being good. Even though there's shame in their body, it's false. It's just, look, you can't do anything other than that when you're in shame. I get that. But you see, that's the lack of integrity that I was doing, is not owning something that was infused into my teaching. It was affecting things. I was literally identified with something and the shame of that kept me from sharing it. So that's just not effective teachings at all. It just isn't. It's just somebody having shit to deal with. And it's okay that we have that, but my issue is my own non-transparency around it. Now, you might say, well, you felt shame. Of course you wouldn't share it with us. Right, but see, look, we can't keep saying that. We can't keep saying, well, it's trauma, and we all just have trauma, because that's just too safe, and it keeps us from actually taking accountability for it and responsibility for it. See, we only are trying to dodge responsibility and accountability when we are in repression. Remember that you want to be accountable when you reverse repression, because you're owning all your stuff. And if you're not accountable for something, it would be painful. And you would feel that. So you would just become accountable for it and own it, not to identify with it. It's not that. It's to feel and allow the emotions in that are keeping the accountability from happening. So for example, me being a teacher, the accountability would have just been, hey, I'm lying. Yeah, I am identified with something. Shame. And it's kind of running my life on the side here, but I can't share that with you. Well, I just did. See, that's really hard to do when there's shame. But we can't just say, oh, well, that's because you have trauma and then you get a pass, because we could just say that about everything. Like I could just go and violate somebody's boundaries tomorrow and say, well, that was my shame and my repression. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, accountability, I don't know. It's trauma. Like, what am I going to do? It's just happening. That doesn't really work, you know? And we know that. We know that whole thing, that whatever that is, that doesn't take responsibility and spirituality is a big fucking problem. But you have to be really careful also with coming out of repression and dealing with stuff like this, because you could use this to be good, right? Like, oh, I'm the teacher who's dealt with all of his shame. I'm not bypassing. I'm really good. It's not there. Because in order to come to this place, I've already had to deal with all that have to be good stuff. All of it, because I had to come out of repression. So it might look like that. See, that's what I'm saying. A hammer only sees nails. So you have to be careful when people are coming out of repression, because you might shadow box on them. And that will make you suffer. See, so if people say, oh, well, now you're just trying to be good by being the most transparent. Well, I'll go into that and process that. And if there's energy on that, of course. But then are you going to suffer because of that? Is that just keeping you safe by saying that so that you don't have to do something, feel something, inquire into something? Shame. Yeah, it's a lot to carry, guys. If you have any conscience, unless you're a narcissist, or if you don't have any empathy, or to be carrying that and to not own that to me is suspect, especially if you start to become aware of it. So some of these teachers who were sharing about it they started to share about it because they were aware of it, and I appreciated that transparency, like Adya sharing about it. I have respect for teachers like that, like Ram Dass, who was in the line at the porn theater, the gay porn theater, and one of his students comes up, and he feels this rush of shame, and he realizes, oh, I have something to process here. Like, just him telling that story, I like him. Not that his whole teaching is agreeable, but that takes a lot to say that. And he set, in my way, in my view, he sort of set a precedent for teachers after that. If they don't own their shame, at least at all, it just feels like hiding. Because once one teacher does it and breaks that wall, then you have to look at the other teachers and say, well, what are you doing behind the wall, if anything? It just takes one to break their silence. But see, if one teacher breaks their silence, people might just make them into like, oh, well, you're just unconscious. The rest of the teachers are all embodied and awake, though. You're just the odd one out. Probably not. Probably it's what that teacher's experiencing is more common than you think, but because of shame, you don't hear about it. I don't know how anybody would prove to you that they don't have shame, and it's not about that kind of ego thing, but you should be looking at me compared to where I was. And I think you'll learn that when you look at other teachers, you'll see where they are just by looking at my life. Because from 2007 until 2017, I wasn't really honest. That was shame. And so what did my dishonesty and shame look like? It looked like somebody who wasn't really opening to the dark parts. So putting on a show of like awareness, and that's it. Just kind of sanitized show, hiding. See what I mean? Just look around. It's not real. The stuff that you see people sharing of these teachers, and we're talking about non-duality, it's too sanitized. It's too, where's the darkness? There's no way you could have embodied that light without meeting the darkness. So where is it? But if I have to be good in the world, I'm not going to share it. Or if I have to be peaceful, because shame isn't really very peaceful. Or if I have to be kind, because how kind is it if I say, if I'm kind to you and just I show up a certain way, but then you know that behind the scenes I'm like a different way. I don't want you to know that. When I have shame. I mean, for us teachers, guys, it would be hard for a teacher to even say they're hurt by something. Even though that would be okay because trauma is trauma. And what a lot of teachers did then, what I did, is we just bury those reactions and triggers and contraction, then we get sick. As you can see, although they won't admit it, because that would be opening to the shame. That their diseases are at least in part emotional, at least in part. You know, also shame is like, not, you'll see it from the teachers. Here's another indicator that they're dealing with present shame in their body that's running their life to a certain degree. Is that if they are transparent, it'll always be after the fact. That's okay, though. It's like to say, oh, I just processed something. But like, if I'm really, really transparent, I'll just tell you that I'm processing something right now. See, unless I'm trying to get you to believe something, if I'm being false, then I wouldn't tell you. But if I'm not trying to get you to believe something false about me, I would just tell you. That's why I've told you about the trust issue that very recently came up. And this is connected to the shame. I'm just going to say this really briefly because I've already talked about it. The distrust issue was a deep trauma issue and never arose as stories around trust. It arose as identity. The anger, repression, and the distrust arose as I'm unlovable in my first marriage. So again, that identity went away at some point. The distrust remained. Distrust of my own experience, including shame. So yeah, just recently. And in fact, I'm still in that process because to the extent that there's a distrust there that I still can't see, that might come up in relationship. That's where it would come up. then yeah, I'm in that process. And it took me a long time to be able to say that I'm in a process. Because for the first few years of teaching, there wasn't much processing because I was in that honeymoon thing, where the shame and the repression hadn't come to the surface. And I thought I was done. Through the years, I've been pretty good, especially with anger repression, about sharing that I am processing stuff except the anger. And so I was really hiding a lot of that. And so I wouldn't share. It's the anger repression and the shame, in my view, that keeps us from sharing in real time what's going on for us. Because there's a really deep unconsciousness with shame and anger repression or other repression. It creates like this, like you're blinded by it. Like it's there, and you might share about it, but it's like you don't want to share about it as if it's too close to you. You want to share with like some distance, because there's a false identity there still. So you're trying to impress the audience, like saying, well, I had that, but I don't have that anymore. See, if that's honest, that's good. We want people to be honest too. If you're free, tell us, please. And prove it, show it, like live that way. Go into your body and show it to us. But if you're experiencing something right now, it'd be really helpful for our teachers and our healers to be really transparent around that, because it becomes an active, alive teaching. See, because the distrust issue had involved you guys. See, if I would have hidden that, it affected my capacity to comment with you and connect with you in a really vulnerable way or an open way, even on social media. So by holding that back and not sharing that out of shame, it affects this. See, I'm just not being open. So if you start to see me comment more, if I'm coming from shame, I might lie to you about it and say, oh, well, the reason that I'm commenting more is because I want to get more people interested in the work. That's why. That's bullshit. The reason is because I didn't trust people at a really deep level, and I didn't know. That's what I mean. And I'm in the process now at the, in those layers. I just couldn't get to it before I came out of anger repression. Some of these deep distrust and disconnection issues that come directly from trauma can't be reached until we release the layers that are hidden in the body. So that's real-time sharing, see? And that's important for me as an inside-out teacher to share in real time, but I couldn't until I dealt with that shame and that buried anger. Because, see, now there's nothing hidden. I mean, well, there could be something else there, but I'm not aware of it. So we'll see what happens if something else is there that I don't see. But with regard to the things that I've seen, everything is on the table with you, including in real time. And that's important for me. That's the same reason that's important for me not to live in shame in my relationship. If there's something going on, I want to say it in real time. Now, in other words, presence, hear, speak. When I say real time, it just means making conscious feelings and thoughts and sharing those. And if I can't, processing so that I can, and say in real time so that truth is coming out of my mouth and not lies, for self-protection. I don't think of this as like I have to be perfect. That would be the ego trying to impress or stay safe. It's just, no, it's opening to the non-dual is what it is. Just ever increasingly opening to that, what I am. Shame on you, Scott. Like, I can't feel shame. But it's not to say that there's not something there that I don't know. Let me see what's left with this. I want to share this real quick, because this is how I see my life now. When it comes to this shame and this anger that was buried in these other things, it's almost like the metaphor would be, I'm in this house, and this house is my life. And I just can't deal with things about myself, certain things, and certain emotions. So I just store that energy in different places in my house. Like under the sink, under the bed, in the closet, the garage. And that's myself. That's my happiness. That's my freedom. And I don't even know that I've done that. So here I come on as a teacher, and what I've recognized is the initial awareness. Like so many teachers, I haven't embodied that. So I'm bright-eyed and ready to help everybody. But I haven't met myself everywhere yet. And so that's why I just wasn't the kind of teacher that I would want to be. So the metaphor would be, with regard to this shame and even anger, is like, it's all me. The reason that I couldn't share that is because I wasn't owning it. I wasn't integrating it. It's all me, awareness. And so through the years, I've found myself in various parts of my house, but I didn't have the skills to, own that. So I would find the shame. Find myself at a gay bathhouse, which would be fine, except for their shame there. And there I am, meeting myself. So I just put my emotions there. And I don't have to feel shame there, but I did that. I created that for myself so that I could stay small and hide. So I would just meet myself there and own the anger and the shame skillfully. And it was like, and then there's no shame. I'm just being myself at the bathhouse, having fun. And then I came on camera and I told you about it. You might not want to hear about it, but that's part of my practice, is just transparency. Just giving you an example. Or my anger, I just put it in different places, like shadows, authority. I don't like authority. See, authority was just holding my anger until I was ready to feel it. I just didn't trust my own experience. So when I was ready to trust my own experience and own my anger, the authority shadow goes away, because that was me. I had just hid that part of myself in authority. Or chronic pain. Like I just put myself there, my anger and my shame. And it looks like that's not me, that's pain, that's something else. That's not my emotions and thoughts. But no, I put myself there. It's like finding myself in the cabinet of the house and like, whoop, there I am. And then the pain goes away because I don't need it anymore to store these parts of myself. Or the deficiency story. I have to be good. That came with anger, repression, and shame, right? Because how can you be good when there's shame, right? You want to be good because there is shame. That's what it is. But I put myself in that identity, my energy. Like, that's not what I am. There's this imposter coming from the shame and repression, and that's not what I am either. So I had to own that. And then after a while, you own all parts of yourself. And you just realize, I was already free. I already had everything that I needed. I was just hiding it from myself, including the shame. And I'll just finish off with that metaphor. So many people are having that initial recognition or pointing or wanting that when they don't realize they have to go throughout their house and discover themselves. And so many people are just stopping there because, for example, shame. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to process it. I didn't either. Or they're scared of it. Let me say just a couple things before I go about processing shame. You can't get to it through processing identity. Forget it. I mean, I will sign on the dotted line on that for anybody. Truly, I've never seen anybody able to transmute fully shame just by looking at the identities that come from it, because it's really powerful energy of holding yourself back and being afraid and raging inside because you're afraid and you're mad at the people that shamed you. That's not going to just fall away because you questioned, I'm not good enough. Thoughts. So that doesn't work, in my view. What it can do is regulate the shame as the identities kind of fall away, as you notice them. The shame just settles back into the body. You still have it, but your system is more regulated. That's what happens when you look at identity around shame. If you want to get into shame, 3D work. Discover the frozen fear in it, afraid to be seen. The anger and or hurt that's already your primary repression is going to be in it. Because it's all somatic work is what I found. Let me just check and see if there's anything that I left out here, because it's the shame topic. And if I left something out, it could be because of shame. Because of shame. I've told you about my foot fetish. And with the feet of the man that I love. I processed that recently just because there was a little bit of shame. And it was like, this is mine. As I said, you can't have this. And that was the only reason. It didn't feel like the foot fetish was like more shameful than like other forms of sex that I've done. It's just, I don't know. There's something about, when I love a man's feet, it's always the man that I'm in love with. And it's like a really private thing. That's okay, except for the shame with it. So when I process that, now I can share it. And I was joking around. People are probably saying too much information. Let me just see one more check. I'm not ashamed of anything. Feeling down in my body. There was just a thought. There was no energy on it. I just saw my saying to a teacher, hey, that could be repression behind your disease. And then I see some people coming out of the woodwork trying to kind of like silence me as if my expression is wrong. So there's just a little bit of like, it isn't even an energy. It's like a tone with it, those memories. But as I'm feeling it in my body, I've already looked at that. It's just interesting that came up, and it gave me a chance to be honest in real time that was there. Yeah, you just can't do the inside out path without linking up all these things. So I couldn't teach it if I didn't link up in real time what's happening for me. Like if I go to the gym and I procrastinate, or I did, I record that so you can see that in real time and where it's coming from. That's what I'm doing in the members area. There's lots of videos and audios that I've done where I show people and I do my process for people. Okay, that's it. Shame, going once. Shame, going twice. There's no energy. And that feels great. Thanks, guys.